I just realised I look like Fred Dibner. Oh, sorry, I'm live. Well, good afternoon. This is Ian R. Crane, and it's the afternoon of Tuesday, the 12th of March 2019. And as you can see, it's not as green as my usual surroundings, but I'm here outside the Royal Courts of Justice in London, and of course I'm here with Lynn Tyre, and I'm pleased to say that Lynn Tyre is still at liberty.
Just about.
Just about. Although it's not for lack of trying by the Crown Prosecution Service representing France, of course, who are trying to extradite Lynn to France to face charges in France. So despite the fact that David, as everyone watching this will be aware, faced charges of producing and distributing an unlicensed medicine, for which he's currently serving time in Wandsworth Jail. But the British Crown Prosecution Service could not find any justifiable reason to bring charges against Lynn. But the French equivalent of the MHRA decided that they would attempt to extradite Lynn. So Lynn has been effectively on bail for 2 years, and this hearing has been some 700 days after the European arrest warrant was issued, and this is effectively an appeal. So we'll go into a little bit of detail in just a second, but Lynn, how are you feeling right now?
I'm pleased it's over for today. We've got something coming up again in 2 weeks' time because of the CPS, but today I'm just grateful to be outside, and for all the support I've had. I just could not imagine how many people turned up today, and I just cannot say thank you enough to them. It was just amazing. They made me cry, the amount of support and love that was there, even before I walked into the courtroom. It was just amazing.
Well, I reckon we had about 70 people here in support of Lynn today. That was more than the court could accommodate in the public gallery. But to be fair to Justice Supperstone, he made an effort to accommodate everybody, and effectively you had your supporters all around the court.
Yeah, he just didn't care where we were so long as we weren't with him. But, you know, he was going to take over the solicitors' bench, but we weren't allowed to do that. But the number of people and the amount of energy in that room was just so amazing. You just couldn't fault it, and I'm still, you can make me cry because I'm just so grateful for all the support. Thank you.
Well, you know, and people had travelled from as far as Whitby. The lady coming from Whitby left at 2:30 in the morning to get here. We had somebody from Rotherham, from Clacton-on-Sea, and from where else? Carlisle. Norfolk, North London,
Ely.
Carlisle,
Ely.
yeah, and a few people from south of the river as well. But it was a fantastic turnout, and the spirit of the support was not lost on the judge, or certainly on the CPS. Now, let's talk a little bit about what happened today. Now, at one point today, and forgive me for saying this, but at one point early in the day, Lynn, you were so frustrated by the way proceedings were unfolding, you were on the cusp of wanting to fire your barrister.
That was true, because at home, I didn't bring it today, I've got a document of 600 pages, and most of that document is detailing prison conditions in France. And I was getting fed up with how many people I'm going to share my cell with, where I'm going to the toilet, what the conditions are. You know, it was just getting repetitive and boring. It was just...
Call us in the middle of a live stream. Sorry, we're back live again.
Okay.
If somebody tries to call, unfortunately the camera may drop out again, but I'll get rid of the call and we'll be back. Sorry, say again.
No, it's just basically, I've been on top of my case now. So I know everything that's going on. I know all about the extradition warrant and everything. And also as well, my barrister was the only one that was right about the number of people in the French prisons where I could go to the toilet, where I could shower, and how many girls I'd be sharing my cell with. You know,
and how many rats as well?
And the rats, yeah. The rats don't speak English, so I was a bit worried about that one. I don't know how to say bonjour in rats, you know. But this, I was going to fire him at one point because it was just getting tedious. We needed to move on to get on with the actual proceedings, the things I was being charged with. Anyway, I'll hand back to him because I'm a little bit...
that Lynn's frustration was quite understandable, but a little bit of counsel. We said, yes, just give him time. And certainly by mid-morning, he was finding his momentum.
Yeah.
And, basically to cut to the quick, the Crown Prosecution Service was struggling to actually come up with the substance. And this wasn't lost on the judge. And basically, it was effectively an arrest warrant for David Noakes. And what they had tried to do was simply cut and paste from the arrest warrant for David and then try and apply it to Lynn. And as Lynn's barrister was very able in pointing out that actually there's no substance to this. There's no real evidence of Lynn having committed any crime. And it basically became very clear that this was a French fishing expedition. And of course, the French judiciary are simply acting on behalf of Big Pharma. And on the basis that, the British authorities couldn't find any substance against Lynn. So they basically told the French that, okay, well, you get Lynn Tyre over to France and then we can deal with her in France.
It was actually beautiful because two things. When I had my European arrest warrant issued, it had exactly the same case number and reference number as David's. The only thing that changed was my name. And when they arrested me at my house, they are supposed to, when they issue an arrest warrant, to do it in your native language. I was given a European arrest warrant at Canterbury Police Station. They go, there you go, gorgeous.
In French.
This is what you're being charged with. And I was going, it's in French. And I was going, yeah. I said, it's supposed to be my native language. But fortunately, I had a few hours with some cute policemen on the way to Westminster for the bail conditions where I could actually read it, So me and David, same but different, I don't know.
Well, your barrister was doing a really good job, eventually, of getting to the substance. And the substance was that there was no substance in the arrest warrant, basically. And, at this point, the CPS barrister, Mr. Seaman. No, it wasn't Seaman.
No, it wasn't.
It might as well have been. That's a Freudian slip, sorry. Yeah. It was Seaford, wasn't it? Seaford. Mr. Seaford.
It's not spelled Seaford though, is it? Sheaford.
Is it Sheaford? Okay. Well, he realised that actually he had been found wanting. And so he got desperate. And he literally started making stuff up as he went along, which of course was not lost on the judge. And the judge basically, I think, strung him along, actually. And then he got desperate. And I have to say that in all the time that I've spent in courtrooms over the past few years, I saw the lowest shot ever from a desperate barrister. Because part of Lynn's case is that Lynn is a carer for her elderly parents. And the documentation was produced from the Kent Health Authority to prove that that was the case. And Mr. Seaford, yes, whatever his name is, basically then stood up and said, well, she's not really the primary carer because her father's the primary carer for his mother. The only concern here is if her father actually suffers and has to go into hospital, then of course she would become the carer. But this is really not something that's relevant. And this was the cheapest shot that I have seen presented in a courtroom. And for me, this was the final act of desperation by a barrister that knew that there was no real substance. And where we're at right now is that a part of his desperation was that he said, well, yes, of course, there's no actual charges here, but if there were charges, then I can actually produce what those charges would be within 24 hours. And the judge was about to hold him to that, but then the judge sort of said, well, I'll give you a little bit more time, at which point somebody in the public gallery said, well, actually, you said 24 hours. And the judge at that point did sort of request that the audience participation be perhaps a little restrained. But nonetheless, he gave the barrister effectively 7 days to produce the charges as they would or might appear if this arrest warrant had been issued in England. And then he gave Lynn's barrister. They don't get the message that we're... They don't get the message that we're on a live stream. Oh, I think we may have lost... No, hang on a second.
Carry on, I'll send you this feed.
Okay, no, I think we're back. Okay, so sorry about that. So then, of course, Lynn's barrister has the opportunity to rebut. So that puts another 3 days on it. So anyway, where we're at, the judge had already said that he wasn't going to make a ruling today because this is a very complex case and he wanted to consider all of the evidence. But basically, there was no real evidence. But the judge has said that, he's going to take some time. And obviously, he's got to be sure that he's got the appropriate arguments to respond to the French government, the French legal system, if he should decide to dismiss this application. So there is going to be a further 1 hour hearing.
1 hour, you reckon?
Just 1 hour, or it might run to 2, but basically it's going to be listed for 1 hour. And it's simply going to be an opportunity for the two barristers to submit their final oral arguments based on this latest submission that the CPS have been given the opportunity to do.
But from my point of view, I just cannot understand why, when there are charges there, why he suddenly wanted to convert it into English. And he was asked that he would be charged for it. Why?
Well, it's desperation. It's just desperation. Yeah. I mean, he knew he was on the back foot and he was just literally trying to buy time. So we need to have an absolutely packed public gallery in the 2 weeks. Now, we don't know the exact date yet. It's going to be the somewhere probably around about the 27th or 28th of the month. And obviously, it's a long way for people to come if they're travelling from the north of England for a 1 hour hearing. So this is where we really need people in the London area to step up to the plate to provide that support for Lynn. I'm going to do everything I possibly can to be here for that hearing. When we know what the date is, obviously I will share it widely.
But don't forget that they also mentioned David on the 28th.
So David, there's also a prospective directions hearing for David on the 28th of March, and this is, I think, being listed at Westminster Magistrates Court. But the issue here is this was the categoric statement by the barrister representing the French legal system that they are going for David. And actually going for Lynn was just a fishing expedition.
And you as bait.
To use you as bait, basically. But they want David. So here we have David Noakes. He's been sentenced by Judge Lorraine Smith, and bear in mind that Justice Lorraine Smith made it very clear during the hearing that GcMAF wasn't on trial, and he made the outstanding but very concerning observation that he was not presiding over a court of morality. He was presiding over a court of law. And basically that is the statement that the judges are effectively, and forgive the language, but that statement indicates that the judiciary is simply whoring for the corporatocracy. Because, if the judiciary was doing the right thing, which is representing humanity, then obviously the case would be dismissed, regardless, because, as he said, he was not challenging the efficacy of GcMAF, and he made the observation that a lot of people, he accepted that a lot of people had benefited from GcMAF, and he hoped that people would have the opportunity to benefit in the future. But of course, not if Big Pharma gets its way. So, David, who has not exactly had a great time in Wandsworth Prison, it's not exactly Butlins, but it's expected that he will be released on tag later this month, and he's going to come out and walk straight in to an effort to extradite him to France. And David's health is not great, and what we've heard today about the conditions in French jails from independent assessments of French jails, then the reality is that if David goes to France, he's unlikely to survive that experience.
He's not going to go to France because I'm going to fight as hard as I can to prevent it happening.
Well,
I,
as will I think many. Well,
I,
as will I think many of us,
Yeah,
Lynn.
yeah.
And you know, it's
Yeah,
so
will.
important, so important that you know people start to participate in this. You know, we had 70 odd people here today, but you know we really need hundreds. We need them to be moving this to the largest court they have. You know, the judiciary need to be under scrutiny. Freudian sit there. But anyway, the judiciary needs to be scrutinised, and they need to realise that, you know, the corporatocracy should not retain dominion at the expense of human health and well-being. So this is an extremely important fight. You know, 1 in 2 people is expected to suffer from some form of cancer within the next decade, and within the next 2 decades it's anticipated that pretty much everybody will contract some form of cancer during the course of their life. And of course the rollout of 5G, if that should continue, is pretty much guaranteed to make that happen. So you know, we are living in multiple exciting times. You know, so many other subjects we could be talking about right now, but you know, for the moment let's focus on GcMAF and Big Pharma's global attempts to shut down a product that has a proven efficacy, but Big Pharma definitely do not want it to come to market because it will have a phenomenal impact on their revenue streams of chemo and radiotherapy. Is that about?
yeah, that's about it. As I say, it's been a tough day, but we've got through it, and some things have come out, but it's positive, and I just thank you to everybody, and it's your last say. It's very simple.
Well, thank you so much, you know, for everybody who has supported us in whatever way they can, and supported Lynn and supported David. David, of course, at the moment is still in Wandsworth Jail, and David and Lynn have asked me to pass on their thanks to all those people who have taken the time and the effort to write to David. You know, he's been spending sort of 23 hours basically in solitary confinement each day in his cell, and you know, obviously he's not a well man. But you know, hopefully he'll be out in a couple of weeks, and of course we will bring David to camera and let David talk about his experience. But you know, like I said, he's out of the frying pan into the proverbial fire, because he's going to be facing that extradition hearing, which we, the British public, have to make sure doesn't happen, and we have to make sure that the judiciary understand that ultimately they have a responsibility to the British people and not to the corporatocracy. So thank you for sharing with me this afternoon. On the basis that we've put this out now, I'm not going to do a live stream tomorrow morning, but I will be back with you on Friday morning at 8:30 a.m. But in the meantime, please help to spread the word, share this around, talk to people, get GcMAF into the wider consciousness. People need to know just how pernicious the pharmaceutical industry is in trying to hang on to its revenue streams. It has no interest whatsoever in the health and well-being of the wider population. And as Goldman Sachs have quite clearly elucidated in their report, which was published last year, curing people is not a sustainable business model. Keeping people sick certainly is. So thanks again for joining me and Lynn this afternoon. So Lynn, come back. You know, it's wonderful that you're actually this side of the fence with us, and long may that continue.
Thank you.
So
guys.
you have a great day, and I'll be back with you on Friday morning at 8:30. You take care now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's quite neat. That's 24 pounds.
I'm not sure that I think we lost it. I think we lost the Facebook one, but it went.